Let me talk to you like you're sitting right next to me for a moment, not as a coach yelling at you, not as someone judging you, but as someone who sees something you might not be seeing yet. You're probably the kind of man who stays. You stay when conversations get confusing. You stay when effort isn't matched. You stay when the signals are mixed and the answers are unclear. And deep down, you tell yourself something that sounds responsible, mature, even loving. Walking away feels selfish. If I leave, I'm giving up. Real men don't quit. But here's the uncomfortable question I want you to sit with right now. What if the thing you think makes you a good man is the very thing making women feel unsafe around you? I know, that stings a little, because you're not trying to control anyone. You're not trying to dominate or manipulate. You're just trying to hold on. And yet, from a psychological standpoint, safety isn't built on how long you stay. It's built on how freely you could leave. Here's the paradox most men never hear explained clearly. Women don't feel safest with men who promise they'll never leave. They feel safest with men who can leave, but choose not to. Think about that difference for a second. One is a man staying out of fear, the other is a man staying out of choice. And the body, especially the female nervous system, knows the difference immediately. When a man shows he cannot walk away, even when something feels wrong, what he unknowingly communicates is this: I need this connection to feel okay. That need creates pressure. Pressure creates tension, and tension destroys safety. This is why so many men feel confused. You're doing everything right on paper, communicating, checking in, staying consistent, and yet something still feels off. She pulls back. She hesitates. She says she's not sure. And you wonder, why does it feel like the more I stay, the less secure she becomes? Because emotional safety is not about effort alone. It's about emotional stability under loss. Psychological research on attachment and regulation consistently shows this. People feel safest around individuals who can tolerate separation without collapsing, chasing, or panicking. In simple terms, someone who can walk away calmly is someone whose emotions are regulated, and regulated people feel safe. Now here's where this becomes really important for you. Women are constantly scanning for emotional volatility, not consciously, but instinctively. They're asking questions like, what happens if I disappoint him? What happens if I say no? What happens if I change my mind? A man who can't walk away often reacts with over-explaining, over-texting, overstaying, over-pleasing. Not because he's weak, but because he's afraid. And fear is not comforting. So let me gently challenge you here. Walking away doesn't make you cold. It doesn't make you heartless. And it doesn't mean you don't care. In many cases, it's the clearest signal that you trust yourself. And when a woman senses that a man trusts himself, that he won't lose control, beg, or resent her, her nervous system relaxes. Relaxation is where attraction and safety live. Throughout this video, I'm going to show you why men who can walk away, without anger, without punishment, without drama, are often the men women feel most secure around. Not because they're distant, but because they are grounded. So as we move into the first section, I want you to keep one question in your mind. Are you staying because it's right? Or because walking away feels too scary to face? That answer changes everything. Why the ability to walk away signals emotional safety? Let me ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly, not out loud, just to yourself. Have you ever felt like you had to prove your value to a woman? Like if you didn't try harder, say more, stay longer, explain yourself better, you might lose her? Now here's the uncomfortable truth most men never hear. The very fear that makes you stay is the same thing that makes women feel unsafe. And I know that sounds harsh, so let's slow this down and unpack it together. Imagine you're sitting next to me right now. You're a good guy, you care, you don't want to hurt anyone, you don't want to walk away too fast and mess things up. So you stay. You tolerate confusion, mixed signals, disrespect, silence. You tell yourself, if I just hold on a little longer, she'll see who I really am. But here's the question no one ever asks you. What does your inability to walk away actually communicate? From a psychological perspective, humans assess emotional safety not through words, but through behavior under pressure. One of the strongest markers of emotional stability is choice, especially the ability to choose not to stay in situations that feel misaligned. When a man can walk away calmly without anger, begging, or collapsing, it signals something powerful. I am not driven by fear, I am driven by self-respect. And that matters deeply to women, even if they never consciously articulate it, because safety isn't about dominance, it's not about control, it's about predictability and emotional regulation. A man who can't walk away often communicates, unintentionally, I need this to work no matter what, and that no matter what is where anxiety begins. Think about it this way. If someone stays even when they're unhappy, if they stay even when boundaries are crossed, if they stay even when they feel disrespected, what happens when conflict gets serious? Women don't just evaluate how much you care, they evaluate how you handle loss. A man who can walk away shows. He trusts himself. He believes he'll be okay without approval. He doesn't outsource his worth to one relationship. That creates calm, and calm creates safety. Here's the paradox most men miss. Women feel safest with men who don't need them to survive emotionally, not because women want men to disappear, but because emotional independence means stability. It means the relationship is a choice, not a rescue mission. Now let me ask you something directly. If you're staying because you're afraid of being alone, what happens when she senses that fear? Because she will. Humans are incredibly sensitive to emotional undercurrents. You don't have to say it. Your nervous system broadcasts it. And when a woman senses that you can't leave, something shifts inside her. Attraction turns into pressure. Affection turns into responsibility. Interest turns into caution. This is why walking away, quietly, respectfully, without drama, often increases a woman's sense of safety after the fact. Not because she wants to be abandoned, but because she sees, this man chooses me. He is not trapped with me. And choice feels safe. So before we move forward, sit with this question. Are you staying because you genuinely want to, or because you're afraid of what walking away would say about you? Because the moment you can answer that honestly, everything about how women experience you begins to change. Why chasing creates anxiety, even when your intentions are good? Let me ask you something gently, and I want you to answer honestly. When you feel a woman pulling back, what do? Do you try harder? Text more clearly? Explain yourself better? Show her how serious you are? Most men do, and most men believe they're doing the right thing. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Chasing does not feel reassuring to women. It feels unstable. And I know that sounds unfair, especially if you're a man who genuinely cares. So let's slow this down and really understand why. From a psychological perspective, anxiety is not created by lack of attention. It's created by emotional imbalance. When one person is moving toward and the other is standing still, the nervous system notices the pressure immediately. When you chase, what you're often communicating isn't desire, it's urgency. And urgency feels unpredictable. Think about this for a second. If someone keeps coming closer every time you step back, what does that signal? Not confidence, not certainty, but fear of loss. Women don't interpret chasing as, he likes me. They interpret it as, he's afraid to lose me. And fear changes the emotional dynamic completely. Psychological research on attraction and attachment shows that people feel safest around individuals who can regulate themselves when connection feels uncertain. Regulation means you can tolerate silence, you can tolerate space, you can tolerate not knowing. Chasing, on the other hand, says, I need resolution right now. And that need activates stress, not comfort. This is where many men get confused. You think reassurance comes from consistency and effort, but reassurance actually comes from calm presence. Let me make this very simple. A calm man says, without words, I'll be okay either way. A chasing man says, without words, I won't be okay if this doesn't work. Now imagine how that feels on the receiving end. One feels steady, the other feels like responsibility. And here's the part most men never consider. Women don't just think about how you treat them. They think about how you treat yourself. if you abandon your own boundaries to keep someone close, if you overextend emotionally to avoid distance, if you stay hyper-available even when you feel uncertain, what happens when real conflict appears? This is why chasing often leads to a strange outcome. The more you pursue, the more she pulls away, not because she wants drama, but because her nervous system is saying, something here feels off. And she might not even know how to explain it. She'll say things like, I feel overwhelmed. I need space. I'm not ready. But what she's really responding to is pressure. And pressure is the opposite of safety. Here's the hard truth I want you to hear. Calmly, not as an attack. Chasing is often an attempt to control the outcome. Not maliciously, not consciously, but emotionally. You're trying to secure certainty. And certainty cannot be forced. Men who walk away don't chase clarity. They allow it to reveal itself. And that restraint communicates emotional maturity. This is why walking away often feels attractive in hindsight, not because you disappeared, but because you didn't panic, you didn't collapse, you didn't demand reassurance, you didn't over-explain, you stayed grounded, and grounded men feel safe. So let me leave you with this question before we move on. When you chase, are you trying to connect, or are you trying to calm your own fear? Because women can feel the difference instantly, and once you understand that, your entire approach begins to change. Why men who stay at all costs feel unstable to women. I want to say something to you now, and I need you to hear it without defensiveness. This is not an attack. This is an invitation to grow. Many men believe that staying, no matter what, makes them dependable. They believe endurance equals strength, that tolerance equals maturity, that loyalty means never walking away. But here's the truth most men don't want to face. Staying at all costs doesn't feel strong to women. It feels emotionally unstable. And that's where we need to pause. Because instability doesn't always look loud or aggressive. Sometimes it looks quiet. Sometimes it looks patient. Sometimes it looks like a man who keeps swallowing discomfort and calling it love. From a psychological perspective, emotional stability is not about how much you can endure. It's about how well you respond to misalignment. A man who stays no matter what often believes he's being selfless. But what he's really doing is avoiding a harder question. Why am I willing to betray my own boundaries just to stay chosen? Let's be honest for a moment. If you stay when your needs are ignored, your values are dismissed, your boundaries are crossed, your confusion keeps growing, what message are you sending? Not to her, but to yourself. Women are deeply attuned to this, even when they can't articulate it, because a man who refuses to walk away often communicates something dangerous to a woman's nervous system. I don't know where I end and you begin. That lack of emotional separation feels unpredictable, and unpredictability does not feel safe. Here's the wake-up call part, and I'm saying this with care. When you stay at all costs, you're not being noble. You're being avoidant of responsibility to yourself, and women can sense that. They ask themselves, often subconsciously, what happens if I disappoint him? What happens if I change? Will he resent me later for what he tolerated now? Because resentment is what grows when self-abandonment goes unaddressed. And women are not looking for a man who will disappear into them. They're looking for a man who stands with himself. Psychological research around attachment and boundaries shows that people feel safest with partners who can hold both connection and separation without fear. That means you can care deeply without clinging. You can commit without disappearing. You can leave without destroying yourself. Now let me offer you something practical, not theory. If you feel proud of how much you've tolerated, ask yourself this instead. Have I stayed because it aligns with my values, or because leaving would force me to confront my fear of being alone? That answer matters, because women don't feel safe with men who stay because they're afraid. They feel safe with men who stay because they choose to, and choice requires the ability to walk away. Here's the advice I want you to take seriously. Start treating walking away as a skill, not a threat. Walking away calmly means you don't punish. You don't explain endlessly. You don't disappear out of anger. You don't stay to prove your worth. You simply recognize misalignment and respond with self-respect. That is emotional maturity. And emotionally mature men don't create fear, they create clarity. So let me leave you with this final question for this section. If someone watched how you stay in relationships, would they say you're grounded or afraid to let go? That answer determines how safe women feel with you. Why boundaries feel like protection, not rejection. Let me start this section by clearing up one of the biggest misunderstandings men have about boundaries. Most men hear the word boundary and immediately think distance punishment, emotional walls. So when a woman encounters a man with clear boundaries, she assumes he's cold, closed off, or not that interested. But psychologically, boundaries do not feel like rejection. They feel like protection, and that distinction changes everything. Here's why. A boundary is not about pushing someone away. A boundary is about showing where you stand, calmly and clearly. When a man has boundaries, he communicates something very specific to a woman's nervous system. I know who I am, and I will not lose myself to keep you. That feels grounding. Without boundaries, relationships feel blurry, and blurry environments create anxiety. Think about this. If you don't know what someone will tolerate, if you don't know where their limits are, if you don't know what makes them leave, how safe does that actually feel? Not very. Predictability is one of the strongest components of emotional safety. Boundaries create predictability. They answer unspoken questions like, what happens if I cross a line? What happens if I pull away? What happens if I change? A man with boundaries answers those questions without drama. He doesn't explode. He doesn't beg. He doesn't collapse. He responds. This is why women often feel calmer around men who are clear, even when the clarity includes distance. Now here's the part that challenges men the most. When you remove boundaries to keep a woman close, you think you're being accommodating. But what she often experiences is uncertainty, because without boundaries, your presence becomes conditional on her behavior. And conditional presence feels heavy. A woman doesn't want to feel like she has to manage your emotions. She has to be careful not to upset you. She has to stay the same to keep you stable. That's not intimacy. That's emotional responsibility. Boundaries relieve her of that burden. Psychological studies on emotional regulation and secure attachment consistently show that people feel safest around those who can say no without guilt and yes without fear. A man who can walk away respectfully if a boundary is crossed shows he values mutual alignment, not control. And that's the key point. Boundaries are not ultimatums. They are self-respect made visible. When a man calmly says, "This doesn't work for me," without blame or anger, it tells a woman, "He won't trap me. He won't manipulate me. He won't lose himself inside me." That's safety. Let me be very clear with you here. Women don't feel protected by men who endure everything. They feel protected by men who know when to stop. And here's the subtle but powerful truth. A man who has boundaries can be trusted with closeness, because closeness with him won't cost either person their identity. So before we move on, I want you to reflect on this honestly. Do you remove boundaries to be liked, or do you hold boundaries to be respected? Because respect is what creates emotional safety, not compliance. And the moment you understand that, your relationships begin to feel lighter, not heavier. Why walking away is not weakness, it's self-respect. Let's address the belief that sits quietly in the back of many men's minds. The belief that walking away means you failed, that it means you weren't strong enough, that it proves you didn't care enough. I want to gently but firmly take that belief apart, because psychologically, walking away, when done calmly, is not a loss of power. It is evidence of it. Here's why. Weakness is not leaving. Weakness is staying in situations that slowly erode your self-respect. A man who cannot walk away teaches others how to treat him, not through words, but through tolerance. And tolerance without boundaries doesn't feel loving. It feels uncertain. Women don't feel safe around men who abandon themselves. And again, I want you to hear this clearly. Self-respect is not arrogance. It's not emotional distance. It's not indifference. Self-respect is emotional stability. When a man walks away without anger, without revenge, without needing the last word, he communicates something very rare. I value myself enough to choose peace over attachment. That choice is calming. From a psychological standpoint, humans feel safest around people who are internally anchored, people whose identity doesn't dissolve when connection is threatened. A man who can walk away shows he does not panic under uncertainty, he does not cling under pressure, he does not collapse under loss. That steadiness is deeply reassuring. And here's something many men misunderstand. Women are not testing how much you'll tolerate. They're observing how you respond when alignment is missing. If you stay when you're unhappy, if you stay when your needs aren't met, if you stay when something feels wrong, you're not proving devotion. You're teaching her that your boundaries don't matter. And that's not something her nervous system can relax around. Walking away, when done with dignity, does the opposite. It says, I know what I need. I trust myself to handle disappointment. I won't punish you, and I won't punish myself. That's emotional adulthood, and emotionally adult men feel safe. Let me say something that may challenge you, but it's important. A woman feels safer with a man who can leave because she knows he's choosing her freely. Not out of fear, not out of scarcity, not out of obligation. Choice creates safety. And here's the deeper layer. When you walk away from what doesn't align, you're not closing doors, you're clearing space. Space for clarity, space for respect, space for relationships that don't require self-abandonment. So if you've ever felt guilty for considering walking away, I want you to reframe that moment. Ask yourself, am I leaving to hurt or am I leaving to honor myself? Because those are not the same thing, and women can feel the difference immediately. A man who walks away with calm self-respect doesn't create fear. He creates certainty. And certainty is one of the strongest foundations of emotional safety. Let me end this with something that may feel uncomfortable, but honest. Many women are not afraid of men leaving. They are afraid of men who can't. Because a man who cannot walk away is a man who may one day stay angry, resentful, or emotionally trapped. And that kind of staying does not feel loving. It feels dangerous. Here's the controversial truth most men were never taught. A woman feels safest with a man who chooses her every day, not a man who clings because he's afraid of losing her. Safety doesn't come from promises, it comes from self-respect. When you walk away calmly from what doesn't align, you're not rejecting women, you're rejecting fear. You're saying, I trust myself enough to survive disappointment, and that level of emotional stability is rare and attractive. If this video challenged you, good, that means you're growing. I want you to look back at your experiences and ask yourself, where did I stay out of fear? Where did I chase instead of grounding myself? Where did I abandon my boundaries to feel chosen? Drop your experiences in the comments. I read them, and yes, I reach out. Because the men who are willing to reflect honestly are the ones who change their lives, not just their dating patterns. Remember this, walking away doesn't make you less of a man. It makes you a man who can be trusted by others and by himself. And that's where real connection begins.